The one habit that got me to my dream body when I had failed for 7 years before then was sticking to a system that bridged the journey from past me to dream me. And I have taught the same system to hundreds of my successful weight loss students, so I know the system will work for you too if you use it correctly. The problem is when I just straight up explain the system, people always end up using it wrong. I want to save you my 7 painful trial and error years by sharing my cautionary tale of flawed ideas, thoughts, and beliefs, so that when I reveal the system, you grasp how to use it correctly and can do so immediately after this video ends. I grew up believing that adulthood and being overweight are synonymous. As kids, we look at the world around us and without a doubt believe that what we're seeing is all there is to life. My grandparents lived in a time without color, teachers live and sleep in the classroom, and every adult around me was overweight. So that's what would happen to me too. I made peace with that inevitability. And yet, when it happened, I wasn't ready. I remember I was shopping with my best friend at Forever 21. I remember taking a size 2 white V-neck shirt off the shelf, walking into the changing room, and finding myself struggling to fit. I remember staring at myself in the mirror with the shirt bunched up around my shoulders and one arm awkwardly hanging up in the air, thinking, how could this not fit? I didn't buy anything that day. I made my way home and Googled how to lose weight, and the first thing that popped up was something called the GM diet. I lasted 1.5 days on it. Looking back, this makes sense because it's essentially a starvation diet, but I did not know that back then. This experience, combined with the many jokes I had heard about how losing weight means eating bland salads, cemented my second belief about weight loss. Losing weight must be a painful process. So naturally, when I saw weight loss programs that called for replacing all of my current eating habits in one go, or working out for 6 days a week when currently my main workout was making it to the kitchen and back.
Oh hey, could you bring me some popcorn too?
Okay, sometimes. I didn't question it. I figured weight loss is painful, so this is how it must be. It also didn't help that I bought into the dream sold by the marketing of these programs. They featured chiseled abs and mesmerizing body weight stunts. I figured this is what ultimate health and fitness looks like, so of course I want that. All of these beliefs kept me committed to program after program, all of which felt unsustainable. But I figured that's the sacrifice needed for being healthy and fit. Though believing and sticking to these programs was 2 separate things. I would start my week with the intention to prep all my breakfasts and lunches, but by day 3 find myself in line for Dick's Burgers. Or I'd shell out $99 for Beachbody, only to find myself so sore by day 8 that my hamstrings groaned with every step. I have dug too deep, Shanti, but since I truly believed that what I was doing was necessary, I figured my problem is accountability. I just need to find a trainer, nutritionist, or a group fitness class to keep me consistent. Turns out spending thousands of dollars is still not enough to keep me consistent. I think I showed up to my trainer sessions maybe half the time. This 50% consistency would lead me to 2 types of reactions on my weigh-in days. The rational type, I'd see my weight is up and acknowledge that I was only half consistent, so this makes sense. Then I'd vow to be more consistent, which I would be for 2 weeks until I fell back to my old patterns. The second was the funhouse mirror type, where I'd fall into a distorted reality because my mind could remember all the uncomfortable soreness after workouts and the times I exhausted my willpower resisting the donuts my coworker sent an email inviting everybody to try. Rude. I would see my weight go up and think, I'm doing so much. Why am I not losing weight? This would spiral me into chasing new weight loss programs one after another. All of this made my first 2 beliefs stronger and stronger. I was stuck in the cycle for years until a fateful flight from Seattle to Boston. I remember trying down a ham bagel sandwich while running for the gate. Got onto the flight, and suddenly I felt like I couldn't breathe. I called for the air hostess who put it down to flying anxiety. Now, I've flown since I was 4 and been skydiving, so flying anxiety is not a problem I have. When I landed in Boston, still miraculously alive, I figured that was a one-off fluke. But then it happened again as I sat down to watch the Star Trek Into Darkness premiere. I visited cardiologists who hooked me up to a 24/7 heart monitor. The results, nothing wrong. And yet, the I can't breathe episodes kept happening again and again and again. I felt helpless. Some background, I went to school for engineering and was working at Microsoft at the time, so it had become ingrained in me to take a systematic, analytical approach to problems. I don't think it is the best approach for every problem, not to mention it can be quite laborious, so I only employ it for really serious problems. And this qualified as the mother of all serious problems. I looked at the cycle with new somber eyes, and the first thing I decided was I'm not going to tell myself stories that don't serve me. How does it benefit me to think that adulthood is synonymous with being overweight? What do I gain from believing that being healthy and fit means sacrificing taste, a social life, and joyful movement. Instead, I detached myself from these stories. How? I detached my goal from timelines. As long as every single day I'm trending toward habits I believe are healthy, I'm doing well. Essentially, I decided to focus on systems over goals. Detaching from timelines naturally led me to question my goal as well. I didn't care anymore for 21 pounds in 21 days, toned in 30 days, or how she lost 50 pounds in 3 months. So what does that mean for the habits I should be practicing? It follows that they don't have to be exactly what these get fit quick programs say. At first, my goal narrowed to only the impressive body weight skills in the marketing. My belief was that's still ultimate health and fitness, and if I continue on the path toward it, en route, my breathing problems would get solved. However, my motivation kept dying every few weeks, despite using that very same system that eventually worked for me. It was only months later I realized that body weight skills don't compel me in my soul kind of way. I realized I had been blindly trying to achieve goals laid out by society and media. This realization came about because a friend asked me about my dream life, and without a pause, I quoted Oliver Sacks' reflection on his life at age 81. I have had an intercourse with the world. Let me explain. I grew up a third culture kid, and it has left in me a wide-eyed wonder for the breadth of our human experience and the beauty of our planet. I feel a deep longing to not just go where built roads take me, but off the beaten path. Like the kinds accessible only through hikes, sailing, or biking. For example, whenever I'm in San Francisco, I love taking the Coastal Bridge Trail, and I find the view from that trail so much more spectacular than the view tourists get from driving straight to the bridge. I've experienced this over and over again, no matter which place I think about. Not to mention the thoughts, the feelings, the conversations are just so much more intimate when we are physically moving ourselves. And then there is our beautiful ocean. I want to try surfing, I want to snorkel more, and maybe one day when I'm not as scared of fish bigger than my head, try scuba diving. I am fascinated by people who were prolific well into their old age. People who had the mental capacity to keep contributing back to society through their work. A standout achievement in a world where most people are burnt out by the time they hit 40. And a feat only possible with a body and mind that is well loved and taken care of. Now, this may or may not feel moving to you, but it is profoundly compelling to me, and that's what matters. Because whenever I read this or think about it, it gets my butt moving. It took me a long time to figure out this soul-deep, compelling North Star for myself. But even when I didn't know it, the next step was always to boil down this goal into distinct targets. So for example, when my goal was to do mad body weight skills, the targets boiled down to better nutrition to lose excess fat, so lifting my own body weight is easier, resistance training that's focused on calisthenics and mobility. And then once I realized my actual dream life, my targets changed to better nutrition with choices geared toward fueling my travels, work, and adventures, resistance training, but the mix focused on endurance building for long walks, bikes, and swims, cardio because my dream life involves a lot of hiking, biking, and swimming, and make time for hobbies, sleep, and rest, as without them I will burn out and probably won't be prolific in my old age like my inspirations. Once I had my targets, I further narrowed them into habits. The most important thing is to prioritize 1 to 2 new keystone habits for a month. A keystone habit is one which, if you don't get right, the chances of other habits happening drops drastically. During some honest self-interrogating, I admitted to my tendency to cancel everything if I feel I'm falling behind at work. Accordingly, my first keystone habits were: 1. Sleeping and waking up at the same time daily. If I don't do this, I start off my day feeling behind, which makes doing my habits difficult. And second, not checking my phone until after work. This stops me from procrastinating and falling behind on my tasks, which in turn stems my tendency to cancel exercise and meal plans in order to catch up on work. Yep, my starting keystone habits weren't even directly related to weight loss. No wonder my chasing weight loss programs wasn't working, because the problem was how my life around my nutrition and exercise habits squeezed out any possibility of being consistent at any weight loss habit. Then in my habit sheet, I further broke down these 2 keystone habits into smaller chunks. Retired to bed by 8:30 p.m., left phone outside bedroom for proper rest, got out of bed by 6:30 a.m., didn't check phone until after work. Since my keystone habits turned out to not be weight loss specific, I decided to also add an optional habit that I felt 10 out of 10 confident about meeting. Walk 6,000 steps 3 times a week. Note that this is optional, meaning that if I'm unable to meet it, I will drop this one without mental fuss or guilt. Next is setting up my environment to maximize my chances of meeting the habits. To help me retire to bed by 8:30 p.m., I set up an alarm on my Amazon Echo for 8:15 p.m. and then again again at 8:30 p.m. I left my phone charger in the living room instead of my bedroom. I also throw my phone under the couch since out of sight, out of mind really works for me. I set an alarm at 6:15 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. and bought a lamp that mimics sunrise. And finally, I plotted a route around my neighborhood that adds up to 6,000 steps. This may sound ridiculous because I could just go out for a walk and get 6,000 steps, but I'm going to be straight with you. My ability to find excuses to not start something is astounding. And the only way to combat it is to plan so that when it is time to do my habit, I can be a mindless automaton. Next comes tracking in the habit sheet. At the end of every day, I enter 1 if I did the habit, else I enter a 0. The gray blocks are where I'm not targeting to do that habit for that day. If I don't meet all my targets for that day, I enter a note with a reflection for the day on what happened and what I'll do tomorrow. For example, there were times when I didn't make it to bed by 8:30 p.m. So I installed a Chrome extension that blocks all of the internet at 8:30 p.m. no matter what I'm doing. This brought me right back on track next day onward to meeting my goals. And finally, at the end of every month, I reflect on what happened last month and what to do next month. To start, the first thing I do is read my dream life again. Does it still feel compelling? Do I want to add, remove, or edit anything? If I changed it, then I do the previous steps again to refine my day-to-day to ladder up to my new dream life. If there isn't a change to my dream life in a way that changes my targets, I look at my habits from last month with less than 80% completion rate. That's right, I don't expect 100% completion on any habit because that's impossible. I'm not a machine. But I do expect a completion of more than 80% on each habit. As an example, here's my reflection from October. 5 out of 11 of my targeted habits had less than 80% completion rate. Resistance training was 44%, but that was because I injured myself, so I kept the same targets for November. But for walks, I didn't see a good reason for the lack of consistency, so I decided to reduce the frequency to 4 times a week instead of 7 times a week in October. And it goes on for my other habits. Interesting bit here where I talk about subscriptions. This is my email subscriptions, which apparently felt important to read, but at the end of the day, they didn't change anything I'm doing. And worse, were eating up time I meant to use for the habits I am tracking. So I unsubscribed from a whole bunch of email newsletters. I also observed that I'm an impulsive reader. So since I can't be trusted to make the right call in the moment, I sent everything interesting to Instapaper, and then future objective Richa would make the call on what to read. To be honest, I was shocked by how much of not sticking to my nutrition or exercise was because of non-weight loss things like this. All of that time in the past, I spent chasing the best workout or meal plan, and that wasn't even the issue. It was the rest of my life I needed to change. And here's proof in November. You can see strength completion rate went up to 100%, walks to 88%, and even the habits that are less than 80% are still way closer to the 80% threshold. And since I'm doing well on most of my habits in November, I could choose to add a new habit, or I could continue to first get all my habits to over 80% completion rate for the next month. This system has changed my life. Some examples of how. After 7 years of being stuck, I reached my dream body within a year and have maintained it without tracking for 8 years now. I used to burn out all the time from overworking. I haven't crashed into burnout in a long time. My addiction to mindlessly consume media has reduced drastically, making room for hobbies and creative projects. The steps in the system can take some time, like identifying the right targets toward your dream life, but it's so worth it. And if you're losing weight and want to shortcut through this iteration process, then I may be able to help. Check out the free sneak peek into my Badass Body Wash program in the description and comments below. Or if you want to DIY it, then the first thing to figure out is where to start with your targets. Hint, nutrition is 80% of weight loss, and in fact my co-coach Lucy took it to the next level where she lost 100% through nutrition alone. So that's right, 0 exercise. So you don't want to ignore this video, which will tell you what your first nutrition targets should be and how to iterate on them. And always remember, you can do it.